And if this was shot in 2026, Vince would just go in from a mistake into a low taper fade. The whole hour rush on a Sunday with one of my friends, and we not just ate everything. We were yucking it up with these like these mom groups that came in after church. And I'm like, okay, well, when in Tennessee, I'm gonna do like the Tennesseans. I prayed with them. I ate cornbread. It was a good time.
Are you religious?
No.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Yeah, you prayed with them, you participated in their culture. That's nice.
And they maybe I would maybe it have been like 20, 30 minutes away from a baptism. Who knows? It was that good of an experience, and the food was that good.
Yeah.
And I am your Dove, your host, AP. Welcome to Dovewhether. Today I'm joined by an intellect, by a mind set upon a mind, by a philosopher. Oh, question mark. Today I'm joined by a person who does a lot of political and philosophical education online, on TikTok, on Substack, and now on Dovewhether. Today I am joined by Rey. Welcome to the show, Rey.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
People might have seen you on TikTok telling people what liberalism is and isn't through Hegel, which immediately it becomes a filter for anybody that's not serious about the conversation.
Yeah, I talk about all kinds of things on TikTok, Instagram. I do short form content on Hegel, like you said, Marx, Sylvia Federici, who's a Marxist feminist, among Frantz Fanon, who I love and was kind of the main author and revolutionary, importantly, who got me interested in philosophy in the first place. And then sometimes I take it to Substack, and that's where I get the opportunity to really dive into things a little bit more with people. But yeah, like you said, it's crazy. People love Hegel. It's crazy. I didn't know. I thought he was just some old dead German guy. Didn't know people cared about him still. But I'm happy. I'm really happy to see it.
He is in fact an old dead German guy. But here on the show, we kind of have a soft spot for that. For some of them, maybe only two. Maybe actually exactly two. And I wanted to invite you today to the show to talk about these general like concepts about a movie, Haine, which translates to The Anger, which was directed and written by Mathieu Kassovitz, who is a French writer, director, actor, and he released this movie in 1995, starring Vincent Cassel, Said Taghmaoui, and Herbert Kouade. Because I wanted to talk to you about something specific: anger. What's your relationship with this movie? And you know what? What's your relationship with anger?
Yeah, I mean, anger has always been a really important, I think, political emotion. It's a difficult one. It can lead to a lot of destruction when it's not utilized in a good way. But I think anger is also something that's very motivating for the masses. It's something that drives people to action. In philosophy, it's been derided for a long time as an emotion that is seen as a vice. It's seen as something to get rid of. But recently, more increasingly, there have been people who recognize anger for its important qualities, especially for politics, for its political virtues. I think today, especially anger is so interesting given all the very terrible things we've been seeing in the world. And I think from what I see in my circles, the people I see around me, and even in myself, I find myself circling between despair and anger pretty frequently. So I'm really interested in how we can use anger for productive political purposes to motivate social change.
Yeah, and this movie really has a lot of anger in it, and even down to the principal characters in this. They're young men. Young men are always painted as like balls of anger, like ready to pounce and bring about some sort of destruction in their space or to themselves. And this movie, I think, lends itself to that because it is a social thriller about the police brutality in Black and brown communities, minority communities in suburban France. And listener, if you're not familiar, suburban France is the more ghettoized parts of Paris. They're the places that like the undesirables are pushed to. And that is on purpose by both the city government and the state government. Today, like I bring you on, and it's interesting to talk about anger. In this movie, we're gonna talk about that too. We're also gonna talk about some of the like other things that are present here. Anger is an emotion that is amoral. It exists without morality, and so like anger can be seen in the three main characters. It can be seen in the police brutality, in the eyes of the police. It can be seen in some of the like criminals that like are running around. Everyone seems to be angry. We're gonna talk about some of the friendship here, and how little homosexuality or homosociality is part of this movie. And I think what I'm most excited about is how this movie can really like represent this change, this concept of change, this it. We are in the it miniseries, and how this movie both builds and ends with the it, a very precise it that one of the characters, Vince, wants to happen. And so to get the conversation going, I just want to know, Ray, what is the thing? How is anger? How did it stand out in this movie to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was so enraptured by the philosophical drama that I think takes place between Hubert and Vince. I think Saeed is just sort of there sometimes, but Vince and Hubert have very different ways of thinking about how to cope with the frustrations of being in the situation of precarity, poverty, and violence that they're in this ghettoized part of Paris, like you've said, where you see Hubert, who recognizes the problems, but is pretty committed to just trying to escape them, keep his head down, make it happen, get out somehow one way or another. And so there's this way he has to kind of tamp down his anger and frustration. And frustration is a form of anger in my mind. Whereas you see Vince, who is so interested in taking revenge, taking vengeance for his friend who was brutalized by the cops. This desire to use anger and point it like a weapon, a literal weapon, in the form of a gun against the cops. And so you see these really different philosophies, and I see that them duke it out throughout the whole movie. But I also think about how again, I'm interested in how anger can or cannot be used. And I think even for Vince, I mean, Hubert tells him in the middle of the movie, he says, what do you think you're doing trying to kill a cop? You kill one cop, there's hundreds of other cops. What do you think you're going to do by killing one cop with your one gun, your one bullet? So, I think there's lots of ways that this debate, so to speak, about anger takes place throughout the movie.
Yeah. Vince is so angry. All he has is anger and horniness. That's it. There is truly nothing that dominates this young mind more than those two things. He finds a gun by accident, and he then proceeds to fetishize it. He holds on to it. He is reckless with it. He points it to his friends. I assume he's never shot a gun, and it is fully loaded. So even if he wants to use it, he is not educated in the way to use it. So in his mind, his young mind, he just kind of leveled up in power to the point that he could like present his own anger to the system, to the cops.
Yeah, there's a scene I love in the movie where they're running from the cops and they come face to face with a cop. Vince points his gun at the cop like he's gonna shoot him, and then Hubert goes, "Are you stupid?" and knocks the gun out of his hand, and then Hubert beats the hell out of the cop, and they get away. And it's so funny, and I like that you bring this up. Like he kind of levels up, and it just, to me, the characters are they're such kids, you know? They feel so young to me, especially Saeed, but Vince too, and Hubert in a different way. Although I think he has, a world weariness that's a little different. But they're so young, and they have this gun, and they're so young, but they're subject to so much fucked up violence, and they also suddenly have the ability to inflict violence on other people because they have this gun.
And like they don't always relish it, right? Like Vince is the only one that really does. And you mentioned Hubert is like he has a different like mindset about how to deal with his situation, and instead of violence, he actually does something that is a little more liberal, which is like to try to move up the social ladder, the economic ladder. Like he has a gym that gets burned down. He has he's either renting it out or he has access to some form of capital. Not clearly not enough to remove him from the situation of the suburban Paris, but enough for him to feel. Enough for the movie to represent a sense that like he has his own mindset and he's working on that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the different characters, especially Vince and Hubert, represent the different ways that a person can respond to this situation of precarity. Hubert is so interesting in that, yeah, it's this desire to perhaps to lift oneself up by the bootstraps. And I think about, there's all kinds of things that come with that. I mean, I think there's ways we can understand that mentality. I mean, this desire to survive. I have a lot of friends who've come from the projects, and they have mixed feelings about having been able to escape, to do the thing that Hubert is trying to do in Paris. I have friends in the US who've been able to do similar things. And there's a lot that comes with that. I think it's always difficult when you think about survival, and the kind of political ambiguities that come with having to survive, what one has to do to survive. But I also think it's interesting with Hubert. I'd be curious to hear what you think about this, but he has this one mentality trying to escape for so much of the film. And then I think in the sort of last act, after him and Saeed are captured by the police, and I think they're basically tortured and abused. And I think there's a shift there a little bit with Hubert, not entirely, but there's a shift where, he's the one defending Saeed in that scene. Like he is much more combative against the cops torturing them than Saeed is. And I see him as a protector in so much of the movie. He protects Vince from doing something dumb, shooting this cop, knocking the gun out of his hand. He protects Saeed by going after these cops while he's tied up. And there's an edginess that I think gets introduced after this scene. Like he seems to be a little bit more open to the kind of playful vagrancy of the other two after this. Like he, a few scenes later, he'll steal someone's wallet, for example. I don't know. I found it interesting to see what happens when a person like that is put into such a horrible situation, not just against himself, but against his friend who he's watching be abused.
It is. He definitely goes through this arc, right? He is positioned as this kind of like semi like criminal guy. He sells drugs and he has access to like the gun market of some sort. But like he isn't worried about but like it's very clear that this movie is just saying that that's just how he gets by. He has this larger gym that he cares about and he wants to do stuff with, where he practices boxing. And that's how we were introduced. He is a protector. And even though that he is he sells drugs, it's seen as him selling drugs so he could like take care of his family, which is like its own bullshit, right? This is still a movie in the 90s, right? Like, I definitely don't like that narrative put on a black character. But what I do know is that the movie's sympathetic to him. In the course of this 24 hours of the movie, he does become a little more radical. He gets so radical after being terrorized by the police and a handful of other people that not only does he steal things, he also participates in a little bit of Nazi bashing, which is like he wouldn't have entered into that level of violence beforehand.
Yeah, that scene. Wow, that scene is so extraordinary to me. The the Nazi bashing when they come across the skinheads. And I think that might be, I mean, don't quote me on this, but that might be the first scene where you really see the three of them engage in like sustained violence. Like there's blood and they're beating the hell out of these people. And I mean, it's justified, of course. They're skinheads. And it's so interesting where I love the scene where Hubert dares Vince to finally shoot the skinhead. And he has this line. He says, this is interesting too. But he says, there are good cops, there are bad cops, but there's no such thing as a good skinhead. So you better kill him, you know? And it's crazy. The scene goes on for so long. Vince doesn't do it. And I think Hubert knows. He knows he doesn't have the guts to actually shoot this gun and kill someone. And I think that's why Hubert puts him in this position. But yeah, I think it goes back to this protectiveness, I think, in Hubert too. Like I think he is so much a child too in so many ways. Not a child, but he's younger. He's not actually, as far as I can tell, supposed to be older than the other characters, but he just seems to have this ability to take care of them and to know them in a way that he has this awareness, I guess, that I don't think the other two possess about themselves or each other.
Yeah, he's a young man. He's like an older brother. He is very much a part of this unit, this three piece, and he takes that. And in that moment where he's daring Vince to like shoot him, he's trying to he's effectively educating him on the limits of his thoughts, Vince's mindset, and where would lead him, and how he's not really ready for that. One of the things that we're talking about in the It season is that people have an internalized feeling of they want to be taken up to the moment where they can express themselves or be allowed to partake in this very libidinal pleasure, even if it is violent, for the sake of scratching an itch that they've had for a long time. In that scene, there's a handful of other ones, but in that scene, I see Vince being confronted with the reality of this internal itch. He wants to do this. He's been talking about wanting to be put in prison, so he has the credentials to prove that he's a tough guy. And now when he is given ample space by Hubert to end a life with the gun that he found, and there's almost no moral ambiguity in between them, Vince doesn't do it. He gets taken up to the It, but can't do it, and he especially doesn't think about the after.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate what you said, because I think this libidinal desire in my mind, it's a libidinal desire to be a hero, and to be a hero through a particular modality, which is through a kind of violence. Of course, it's a movie about young men. There's a set of masculinized tropes involved here. I think it's men in particular who tend to have that kind of libidinal desire for, actualizing justice through violence, i.e. through the barrel of a gun. And it's interesting. Yeah, Hubert, when you put it that way, it's almost meta commentary in a way where Hubert is sort of challenging the character Vins to think about, okay, what can you actually stomach the thought of killing another human? Can you actually do it? Put aside the hero fantasy in your brain where you get to be a badass. Think about what that would actually take from you psychologically. Can you do it? And the answer from Vins is no, he can't and he won't. Right. And it does make me think about when you put it this way in terms of our social context or political context, when we think about what it takes for us to engage in politics, I think we need to bring a certain, I guess, seriousness to what we're demanding from the world, right? I think there are many people who have a sort of individualistic fantasy that they are going to be the one to do the extraordinary, beautiful violence that changes the world, and they will be hailed as a hero. And I think that's just not actually how it works a lot of the time.
No, and not because there isn't a necessity for big change or even the like ugliness of that big change, but it's because it is so individualized. And this is in the European context, right? The Europeans are not like some magical creature that is outside of this hero fantasy, or even the desire to bring violence onto someone. The suburbs of Paris are ghettoized for a reason, but it is interesting to like take that same concept and apply it to the American context, where we're living in 2026. There is so much meaningless violence doled out across this country, both by the state and by people, just random actors. And there is this thought of like is this the moment that I get to be this hero? We talk about masculinity here, and how people walk around with this sense of like, oh, when the moment arises for me to be a hero, I can be a hero. Online, people joke a lot about this, right? This idea that every man has like fantasize of stopping a mass shooter. Not this man. Not this man. I'll tell you that. But one of the things is that like that's effectively the basis of every concealed carry training and permit and educator everywhere in this country.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I think it makes sense. It tracks to me that is the narrative that we use to justify concealed carry in the U.S. Because, of course, we do have a lot of individualism in American culture, in U.S. American culture, and there is very much, I think, the masculinized myth of the lone wolf hero. The one guy who's gonna be brave enough to save the room, presumably of women and children from a mass shooter. It's interesting you bring up guns in this way. I think there's a debate happening. I mean, there's always been a debate, but there's long been a debate happening, and I think it's been reignited recently about whether or not regular people should be armed. And I think one thing that the right has long believed that they should be armed, but I think it's for individualistic reasons. And I think if the left wants to be armed, and has been in the past, I mean, the Black Panthers were definitely armed, for example. I think it will look, it will, and it ought to look different. It ought to be understood in a collective way rather than an individualistic manner.
One part of that is like the trans community, like we love the dolls here, and one thing that has been I've seen the rise of is like trans people openly talking about getting armed or teaching classes on gun safety. And like, is that the exact same way as the right wing talks about it? Absolutely not, right? Because the trans people are less than 1% of the population in the United States. They also are literally being fucking murdered, like literally. And it's not like the fantasy of the right wing people who just want the wrong person to knock on their door for them to put a hole through it, and the person knocking. And in this movie, I wanted to talk about this movie because of the gunness of this. Like this one revolver, this 6-shooter is somehow the key, the pathway to liberation for these guys. And but we know it isn't, because they get murdered with it. They die by the same gun.
Yeah, it's the ending is interesting too in that regard, because I think it's left somewhat ambiguous on purpose what exactly happens. That so for example, it seemed to me that the cop was surprised when Binns is killed. Like it seemed like maybe the gun went off on accident or something like that. And then in the very last scene is Hubert pointing a gun that has one bullet left in it, that Binns had given him, at the cop, and the cop points it at him, and then you don't see. I think you hear a gunshot, but you don't like see what happens at the end. And it does to me. I mean, I would be curious to hear what you think, but to me, it makes me think about something we were talking about earlier, which is the real human cost of violence. Someone that I study is Frantz Fanon. I think you and I have talked about him a little bit before. And there's sometimes a misconception that Fanon is obsessed with violence, or that he fetishizes violence. And I think this is not the case. First of all, we have to distinguish between the violence of the state and the self-defense of regular people. But I think it's also like, we ought not fetishize the kind of harm that a person needs to cause in order to engage in self-defense. I think one of the reasons I found the movie very bleak was that, once you start thinking seriously about violence and you introduce the possibility of violence, a lot can and will be lost. Regardless of how you think about the purpose of that violence, I think it is very real for us to have to think about what it means to cause violence, like what it means to take a life, to lose a life, to see someone lose a life, right? That's something that I thought about watching this.
And I think it's something that is just a stronger reality for a lot of people in 2026. Like, there is a cost here, right? And like I actually think one of the aspects that shifted this general feeling that I've had about people wanting an excuse for violence is actually the murder of Charlie Kirk. Now I would hazard a guess and say I don't know if anybody really engages in the American context. I don't know if the majority of people really engage with what it means for anger and violence to be so dominant in this moment. Because even in the aftermath of Kirk's death, and even the attempt to martyrize him and failed, like we're still talking about a mass shooting at a school by a young man who had access to a gun, and it was caught on 4K in multiple angles, and I don't like that is not right. But regardless of Kirk's politics, that is a marker of a sick place that we're in.
I definitely think that the eruptions of violence that we're seeing are the mark of a sick society. I think a lot of them are symptomatic of a world that is so difficult and causing so much despair for so many people. On the note of Charlie Kirk's killing, oh my God. So I'm a college educator, right? Like I'm a college instructor. Meaning I have students. I teach at a college. I will be very honest. I will tell you, I am personally scared of gun violence on college campuses. A lot of my colleagues are also scared that we will be killed by a shooter, particularly a right-wing shooter. And I can tell you too that I have colleagues that I think it was Utah Valley where this happened. I think that was the school. I have colleagues there who had students who went to the Charlie Kirk event, and saw it happen. So I also study trauma, and I know I study the politics of trauma, and I'm sure, I mean, to say the least, I'm sure there's a lot of trauma for all of the young 18 to 22-year-olds who were in the audience there, and I think with violence, it's just committing it, engaging in it, being a victim of it, being a witness to it, it's going to have a very serious impact on people's psychology and their spirits, I think.
No, I agree with you. I'm sorry. Thank you for being so sober about the reality of being an educator right now. You don't deserve that, and no one deserves that. It's a failure of the U.S. state that this in a place of education that even needs to be thought about.
Mm.
Yeah, we could walk forever to talk about violence, both in the French and in the American context, historically and present. But one of the things I want to take a moment here and talk about these boys. These boys,
Mhm.
they're so fun to watch. They're fun to watch. They're like there's real chemistry there. They're constantly like shitting on each other, joking on each other, and they're also sweet to each other. There is a scene where Saeed, who is a Mena young man, who tells Vince straight up, "You need to cut my hair." And there's this very sweet scene. Having someone cutting your hair is a very delicate and personal experience. And they do it so casually, as in they have this history of doing it, and it's beautiful. I love it.
I know. I love that. I love the trio. They're very cute in a lot of scenes. And I think especially I think Vince and Saeed like early in the movie. I think Hubert sort of has a world weariness throughout and is just fighting with Vince so much. But man, I agree. That scene is very cute. And when he cuts a little bit too much and Saeed is like, "Show me," and he's like, "Okay," and he like just hovers the mirror real quick. "Oh, I can't see that." Like, it's it's adorable. I mean, I love how the movie shows these like these everyday moments of intimacy between friends. I think it's not a movie that's again, it's not fetishizing the violence by any means. And it's not, I think it's not so much a spectacle. I like that it gets into that everyday experience of what it's like to be a young boy in these situations. Yeah, there's intimacy, there's joy, there's things
And
like
if
that.
this was shot in 2026, Vince would just go in from a mistake into a low taper fade for Saeed, and Saeed would have looked great if it won.
I know. I was gonna say. I feel like that could have easily been fixed, but he kind of spends the next several scenes moping about it with his little beanie.
Which is so funny. It's just like he doesn't look bad. I mean, it's not like he
No.
these all three of these actors are like handsome, like they look like movie stars, honestly. And so like having a little patch, a little mismatched patch on your hair,
Yeah.
that to me conversation starter. You trying to talk up a lady. You could be like, oh, can you imagine my barber? Oh, they did this.
Yeah, I mean, I think we see in the movie these guys have no game. Like at the museum, they go up to these women and they get the chance. Like Hubert, like kind of like juices them up. He's, oh, my friend's a romantic. He really wants to talk to you, but he's shy. And then Saeed comes in and just fucks it all up.
It is hilarious. It's so they like. I have seen this. I have been part of this type of like conviviality in between fellas. But the way that Saeed immediately falls into just being a little bit of an incel and being like, oh, yo, you think so less of me? Oh, I'm just like, bro. Ask her how her day is. Ask her what she just listened to or watched.
Yeah, like just be normal. Like just talk to her like a person, man.
And I'm like, come on. Like that gallery scene is one of my favorite scenes because I have been in the exact same situation with fellas drinking free wine, talking shit about art, and also, but I've never dipped into like being a misogynist, right? Not around here, not on mic at least. And I really like it because at the like yeah there's also like this class distinction, even though that like this gallery doesn't seem that fancy at all. Like I feel like I've been to them both in Mexico and the United States, and like all I know is that like it presents maybe a class difference, but what these guys should have been doing from the very beginning is just talking mad shit. Like they should have just been running bits with these like hoity-toity inner city fellas.
Oh yeah, and they're hilarious too. Like they could have done it. I mean, and Hubert again. I think Hubert like he did a good job at the beginning. Like I was like, oh, I didn't know Hubert, you had it like that, you know. But yeah, Saeed again. I don't know what their ages are. I don't know if it's in the text of the film, but he does come across just young. I remember leaving that scene thinking like, have any of you guys actually talked to a woman like ever? Have you ever spoken to a lady?
Well, I believe that like texturally Herbert is the oldest because he's actually spent some time behind bars. Vince is like a young man, maybe 18, 19, and I think Saeed is actually the youngest one. Just out of
Okay.
sake of him talking about older brothers and younger sisters, he seems to be a real like a 17, 18-year old. But they're all like contextually they're just young men.
Yeah.
Young men with absolutely no game. Bro, like I'm having flashbacks of my own like days being a pasty 18-year-old trying to chat people up, and I'm like, no, bro, you don't gotta sound smart. I promise you. Asking a question and shutting up is enough.
Yeah. Yeah, just ask a question, say something funny, give her a compliment.
And I really like the follow-up scene with like the where they're trying to hotwire a car. Hilarious. Hilarious.
Yeah, that was amazing. No, I was just gonna say I really love the pacing of the movie. I was telling you before we started this that I have commitment issues with movies. Like it's hard for me to sit down for 90 to 120 minutes and commit to watching something. But I just the frenetic, fast pace of the movie. It's great, it's very fun. And it really creates an atmosphere. That's
It,
all.
it, it is like the central theme of a clock is really useful to cement this day in the life of these three guys, or to be the most exciting parts or the most like notable parts, even down to like them just kind of like hearing this kid, this like adolescent like talk shit. Also, it's like it's just funny because they're just like very attentive to hearing this, and then there's a cut to like they're still hearing this, and there's a lot of humor here. There's a lot of good pacing here. The shots where they're more active out in Paris, like, is also very fun. This movie never feels stuck anywhere. E- even when they're like, even when they're like in this like coked out like apartment, they don't feel stuck there.
Oh my gosh. I was just thinking about that scene too. That I truly was screaming at the screen when when the guy was pretending to do Russian roulette with himself. It's yeah, that yeah. It does a great job of drawing you in. And it flips between, I think, like you said, the humor and it's funny. It's genuinely like a funny movie in a lot of places. It flips between the humor, it flips between like the intimacy and the joy of these little moments of friendship. It flips between that and sort of like almost adventure type cop chase scenes where they're being chased by the cops in like a maze like format. And then, of course, very serious scenes of police brutality and abuse and torture and all this. Um, there's I was really intrigued and impressed by how the movie manages so many different tones and moods. In this, it's only 90 minutes. Like, it's a short movie.
Oh yeah, when I sat down to watch it, and I was like 90 minutes. Hey yo, I might have enough time for a second movie. But watching them interact is very fun. I really enjoy it, and like it's also representative of just kind of like when you're with the fellas, like it really do be like that. It really is like we're talking big ideas, then like we're talking some sultry shit, and I like it. I like it. You know, the kind of one of the things that I notice here is there's like almost zero homosociality in between these guys, and as in like they're not playing grab ass. They're not calling each other gay in the way that like young men do. They're and like most importantly, they don't kiss, and I kind of hate that. I watched this when I was rereading Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. And in it, like, there's a very, like, coming of age, like, experience there. And I was just kind of like, come on, Hubert, plant that kiss on Vince. Come on, bro. Bro, Vince is giving you kiss me eyes. Bro, come on.
Yeah, you're right that there is. But I don't think there's any. I can't think of any like explicitly homosocial interaction in the movie. You're right. Like I can't. I'm racking my brain trying to think of it, and there's none. No, I mean the most touching that happens is in I think that final or the second to final scene when Hubert is daring Vince to kill the skinhead, and he's like, "Oh, I'll help you," and he's got his hands on I think his arm or his hand or something.
Yeah, no, there's almost nothing, and I think you could maybe extrapolate the misogyny of literally every character towards Said's younger sister, as a way of like I don't know, maybe playing a part of like yeah, I'm talking about your younger sister, but you are literally the same person, effectively the same person. But it is a shame. Like when I'm always watching these movies, especially for the show, I'm always interested in seeing the cross cultural and cross temporal aspects of both homophobia and like some gay shit, and like it, seeing this, I just wonder like there's enough space to like. I mean, these people are French. There's enough space to be gay, and I'm a little sad that it never arrived.
Yeah, I would be curious to learn more about. I mean, I just don't know enough about this genre or the kind of movies being made in France in the 90s, but I'd be curious to learn like to what extent like homosociality is in the text of movies from this time period.
I don't know either. I just know that these fellas are going in between horny and angry or sad, and like these
Yeah.
boys, they need to pick one. They need to pick one, and honestly, there's only one good one out of those three. I think about though the reality is that these guys are close to each other. They comfort each other. They also like aggravate each other, and that is. I do find that to be the case with a lot of the people I know who grew up in similar positions. Some of the people I'm closest to also deal with this like internal homophobia, and since I've come out of the closet, it's not they've never presented me with any homophobia, but it's also like but they've also never presented me with the inverse, which is like when we were getting a little fucking weird with it, as like guys do. Like there's no accusation of me being a creep, which is also nice. But like these guys, ugh. Let me ask you something, Ray. You're a big thinker. You're a big reader. You could drop in one conversation Fanon and Hegel. Yeah. I want to know from your perspective, and especially like dealing with this Substack article that you wrote about the right wing violence and what it looks like. Is it what is the how is the police state present in this movie?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I noticed, of course, the movie is, like you said, it's very sympathetic to someone like Hubert. It's very, very, I think, unsympathetic towards the cops. I mean, every time a cop shows up in the movie, he's a real asshole. I mean, it's not just like, except that maybe there's that one scene where he's polite, but for the most part, these cops are real jerks. And one thing, for me, when we say ACAB, for example, right, like all cops are bastards. To me, what that statement means is it's not necessarily saying every individual cop is an asshole. I mean, I don't know. I have not met every single individual cop, so I couldn't say one way or another. But what I do know is that I know that policing comes out of the legacy of slavery in this country. And I know that mass incarceration is a racist tool of control by the police state. And in particular, today, that police state has, you don't see this in the movie so much, but today in the US, that police state has been augmented by mass surveillance techniques. Okay, so there's lots of ways the police state takes all kinds of power and control in our lives that are totally wild. And in the movie, I think about, it goes back to this question about anger because Hubert tells Vince, you kill one cop, there's 100 more left. What good does it do to kill one cop? And I think when you ask about the police state and not just policing or police officers, it makes me think of the structure, like policing as a structure, not just as a group of individuals, but as a structure. And it feels to me, I mean, this is what makes the movie feel very bleak to me. Like policing is this structure that doesn't go away, right? Like it is the beginning and the end, alpha and omega here. It is the cop. It's the asshole abusive cop who, okay, he does it accidentally. He kills Vince on accident, but he can get away with it. He can get away with killing a working class Jewish man in the ghettoized suburbs of Paris. That he can get away with it because at the end of the day, like that's what the police state is there for. It's to inflict violence with impunity.
And the cops do it. I do like how the movie treats every single cop as like an absolute weirdo, like a creep, like a slithering monster that is only there to do two things: abuse and gleefully abuse. It's only ever abuse. Because like the guy that shot Vince, he's wearing this like Notre Dame sports jacket. Like this is in France, right? Not in Indiana, right? And more importantly, like so there is this like concept of this like transatlantic policing and the police state in total, where this guy probably has seen some undercover shit that might like lend itself to his presentation, at least sartorially. And the other things is like this was released in 95. This would have already been post Rodney King, and this would have been post Stephen Lawrence out in the UK, his murder. And everything that goes along with the racialized police state attacking people of color. And it is not lost on me how Hubert and Saeed are the ones that are tortured. They're the ones that are profiled. They're the ones that are seen as outsiders versus Vince, who is Jewish, and the text describes him as Jewish. He is, due to his pearly white skin, he's able to run away from the cops and escape being tortured, because it doesn't matter if you're within Paris or the suburbs of Paris or in the south side of Chicago or out in LA, as long as there is the police state and you're looking a little too brown, you're gonna get fucked.
Yeah, and I think the film is clear that the characters are very aware that this is how the world works, the racialized nature of policing. I mean, when they are trying to get into that apartment to get to Saeed's weird, coked up friend, and they're punching in the different apartments trying to get in. And I think it was Saeed who says this, but he tells Vince that he has to be the one to talk to the people on camera, because he says something like, me and Hubert, like we would be shot or we would be arrested, or he says something like that. There's something bleak about this too. Like, it's that particular scene is kind of a humorous scene in a way. Even as they're talking about the risk of being arrested and killed by cops, it's just so everyday for them. It's so ordinary for them. But at the same time, it's so ordinary because, this is what I'm trying to say about the structure of the police state, the structure of policing. Like, that is just the foundation of the world they live in. That's just the fundamentals of the world they live in, And I think about the way the movie flips from humor to like seriousness in this regard. It's so ordinary. It's so normal for them that it can be funny to them, but it is also a very serious issue.
And a constant one at that. And I do think, like, this was in 95, right? We're recording this in 2026. Like, the things that are happening in front of us both in the photography and the videography of the beginning sequence of this movie, that's just way more common now. That is just kind of the state of things. In 2026, the cops don't just have a Beretta M9 that could shoot you. They have gigantic armored vehicles to kill you and every person you're next to. And this is just something that like has slowly come about. When we're recording this, like in 2026, and the reason for the It miniseries is there's also this like hope, this interest from a certain parts of American society that eventually, like, it will be time to produce violence. And I think about the libertarians, to be exact here, who used to be way more open to Second Amendment stuff, and now kinda are that, but also very much against being an illegal by being someone without papers. And so, like, things have collapsed into this oddity. Everything is so strange now. The narratives of even the in 1995 of white cops brutalize black bodies has shifted. We live in the reality where CBP is mostly Latinos who are brutalizing mostly Latinos. It makes no sense. And at the behest of what? The white man? And like, there's this kind of breathful waiting for the moment where people can be violent again, or whether that is in like the street or in their workplace. And I don't think that day is going to come, because that day is already here. And I think a lot of people want this larger it to happen, the collapse of the United States, the liberal order, even internationally. But the question is like it's you're not going to get a notification on your phone that says, yeah, you don't have to respond to your boss's email. You have to make that decision at some point. And the characters in this never had that opportunity. It was always forced on them. And, I wonder, and I implore you, listener, to think, like, how are you sitting with this concept of it? How are you both illusioning yourself into waiting for something to happen, and how are you preventing yourself from being something, being part of the productive force of something better to arrive?
I think on that note too, I think about, one thing I think I hear you saying is that there's a sort of deferment of responsibility that people have. Like, they want to see the quote unquote end times, right? They want to see the massive change that'll make the world better. But a lot of people, I think, are more in a posture of waiting for that rather than sort of enacting it in their everyday ways of going about the world. Like instead of enacting it in their actual actions of the here and now, as opposed to constantly deferring it into the future. To me, it is about a deferment of responsibility because I think that we do live in a culture that has become, at least in America, that's become so individualized and also so neoliberal, so privatized that like people are so disconnected from community. It's hard for people to understand, like even to conceptualize how one would go about taking up responsibility for the community and taking up responsibility for one's fellow human being. I think we have been so inundated by consumerist attitudes and cultures that have replaced real connection with other humans in such a way that the only kind of possibility for people to imagine that things could change is if someone else does it in the future and just lets them know, FYI, notification, ping on your iPhone, it's done. We're good. The social change has occurred. And I do think it's very important for us on the left to think about how do we, not just how do we get other people, but how do we get ourselves to actually take up that mantle of responsibility, to do the hard work of being in community and to do the everyday acts of what some people call micro activism in order to change the world, to cause social change.
Yeah. And that's a big question, right? And I think about the right wing just purely as a way of comparison. We're recording on the day where Kristi Noem got fired by Donald Trump as the head of the Department of Homeland Security. And Kristi Noem has been a very loyal servant for the right-wing cause. It is her shamelessness in lying directly to people on camera about the murder of Alex Pretty and Rachel Good that probably ended her career. But up until that moment, she was the belle of the ball in the right wing circle. She was finally doing the thing that people wanted to remigrate these undesirable Latinos all over the country back to wherever hellscape they were shed out of. I think about Soran Mamdani, like his example, as were we in the left waiting for it, this new mensch to come in that is a brown Muslim man from New York, socialist. Were we waiting for him to like expand our point of view, expand our belief in what is available? And I guess that is the dialectic also, but I think although we are talking about individualness and how that has caused things, I do implore people to act individually for the sake of a collective action. And I don't really know what that is. I would like to say you can make a book club and start building community there, but honestly, I think that would have been good 10 years ago. I think now maybe you should talk to your neighbors about how to grow your own food, maybe. Maybe be a little more pragmatic. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely think that it would be good for people to be more in touch with community and in touch with the land. And I think in touch with the things that give life, like growing food, for example. I know what you mean about it feeling a little too late for these book clubs at this point. I wish we had the infrastructure for community built already. But unfortunately, I think a lot of the left is behind the 8 ball in this regard.
Yeah. It is something that I will be exploring more in these episodes. There is no solution here. My always there's no one solution here. So therefore my conversation always ends with just pick something and do it. Just whatever. Knock on a door to talk about growing a plant on your neighbor's garden or whatever, or make that book club, or start a disco night for, trans inclusive baddies or whatever. Like, do something, anything, and do it with others.
Yeah, I really like that. I think it's true that we oftentimes do get bogged down in what is the perfect answer as opposed to what is the thing that I can actually do right now, right here. Um, I think it's tough. I think we have a consumerist, individualist culture. I think COVID probably made things worse in certain ways. Um, I know I find it harder to connect with people since lockdowns has happened. So, it's hard. But I will say one thing I was going to say is I've been heartened. I mean, it's been terrible in a lot of ways, but I've also been heartened by the situation in Minnesota, because after the murder of these two individuals, Good and Preddy, you know, you I was following this pretty closely, especially from creators who are on the ground in Minneapolis, and it's extraordinary to me how quickly they were able to train each other and themselves and community in order to protect each other. Like these people who many of which were not necessarily super involved with activism or organizing were suddenly able to like get trained in a couple of days, with whistles and like other tactics to protect their neighbors. So when I see that, like that kind of emergency community response, I think, oh, okay, like it gives me a bit of hope, right? Like never skip a Hope Corps video, it gives me a little bit of hope.
Yeah, listen to that lo-fi. Listen to that random person giving a street interview and visuals, serenic visuals of bucolic land here and there. Never skip a Hope Core video. Which leads us directly into a little thing we like to call Hopecast. So yeah, in Hopecast we talk about what's bringing us hope or any good vibes, any pleasurable things happening in our life. And so Ray, I'd like to throw it to you. What's bringing you hope these days?
Wow, I love this question. A couple of things. I mean, one is very simple. It's just the weather getting much nicer and warmer, and the ice storm that hit so much of the U.S. being a memory of the past has been wonderful. It's very nice here. Other than that, speaking of community and relating with others, I have been given a lot of hope, honestly, through doing social media, which sounds very counterintuitive, because yes, there is a lot of hate and negativity online, but also I have met such interesting people from all over, not just the US, but all over the world. I have had very, very interesting conversations with people. And it started with me just kind of trying to put myself out there, which is not easy, I can tell you. And I have really felt hope from being able to connect with all kinds of like amazing, smart, interesting people who are doing really interesting work, political work, artistic work, and intellectual work all over the world.
Yeah, and we're living in the long hangover of the slur slacktivist back from the early 2010s, which I think really like has the left has like really for like over a decade really like lost the leverage of social media or just larger mass communication platforms for the sake of whatever they're doing, promoting whatever they're doing, their idea that they're doing, or just looking cool. Looking cool online as a leftist is also important. And it's important in the sense that it changes narratives. And really, I think only after 2020 has the left been more willing to not see being online as a pejorative, but as another tactic for the larger struggle.
Yeah, I mean, I think the right has been very successful at leveraging so-called alternative media, online, social media, and podcast type spaces to forward their agenda. I mean, Trump credited a coalition of podcasters as part of his victory. I mean, I don't know to what extent that is true, right? But that is at least a part of the right-wing world in their minds. And I think the left has, this is my hope core, right? Like, I think there are opportunities for the left to take advantage of that. I mean, for me, as an academic and as someone who's trying to sort of do scholarship in public, do critical political analytic work in public, um, I have been so pleasantly surprised by how receptive some people have been. All kinds of people, in all ages. I mean, I get people who are, in my generation, but I've also gotten people who are like, they'll tell me like, "Oh, I'm 60 years old. I didn't graduate from high school. I'm a grandfather, and I love your content because I want to learn more about socialism, and I like the way you explain things." So and that's just one example, but I get lots of comments like from people all over the world, all kinds of different people who are engaged by this, and I think we need to give people some credit, right? Like, I think we need to give people credit. We need to not act like the Democrats, in that we need to not act like we have to dumb things down for people or act like people are dumb or stupid, right? Like, we have to give them credit. We have to meet people where they are, yes, but meeting people where they are also means bringing our whole, full, authentic selves to the interaction. And I think we can make beautiful things happen when we do that.
100%. 100%. It is another piece, another tool in the toolbox, and I am happy to be seeing that. We need to start the conversation needs to start somewhere, or it needs to be perpetuated somewhere, and I like that, and I think you're part of that, and I think it's good. I encourage you to keep going. What's bringing me hope, though, is we talk about revolutionary optimism, and honestly, like I think there's a lot of struggle that's gonna come, due to the very visible like collapse of the United States. But that is also it gives me a sense of hope. Like I used to walk around thinking, oh, the government is such a powerful institution that it could do anything. But the United States right now, it's getting its ass kicked by a country that doesn't have even the GDP of a place like Delaware. And although that there's a lot of destruction and dismay happening, it also lifts the mask off of this paper tiger that I live in. And I've seen more light now than I have in a long time, because the people of Minneapolis, like throughout the modern day Gestapo slave catchers out of their city by being organized. I have no clue. I don't really know too much about the internal doings of Iran, but what I do know is that seeing the my own government and seeing how they are unable to just get their messaging straight, and there's competing like interest within this like fascist core of the government. All I can think of is these people are not organized. Like people get the impression that they're organized because at every turn in every corner there's a guy with a gun and a badge, but it looks like this country, this government, is way less organized than it's ever been. And to me, all I can say is talk to your neighbors about socialism, talk to your friends about socialism, talk to people about what that means. And it's something I do in my day to day, and it's something I plan on doing even more and more. And it might not be the prettiest source of hope, but damn, I'm eating it.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's so much that I think reflects the way in which we are in the dying throes of the empire right now. And it'll be hard. It'll suck. But I think there's a lot, I don't know. It's too early to say whether Iran will be another Vietnam for the US, but I appreciate what you're seeing and what you're saying here.
Yeah. So, listener, do do yourself a favor. If you're a guy, find yourself two dudes to be gay with and really like take on the world with. If you're a woman, I guess you could do the same, whatever. If you're non-binary, I'm happy you're here. I'm happy you're here, but I know very well you have at least 5 non-binary people with you. So like, I I really enjoyed watching this movie and talking to you, Ray. Where can the good people of Dovewetherland find you?
Yeah. Well, you can find me on TikTok or Instagram. Same name. It's Rey underscore philosophy, Rey with an E, REY underscore philosophy. Or you can find me on Substack for my long form content. And it's just reyphilosophy.substack.com.
And those are linked right there in the description. Go ahead and click that link, hit a like, hit a follow. And you know what? As long as you're doing that, you can like and follow and subscribe to Dovewhether on Instagram, TikTok, up scroll sometimes maybe, and literally everywhere else. You can find us at Dovewhether. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.